When Ani was writing her memoirs in the dark, she had no idea that what she experienced was part of a much broader catastrophe than what happened in the alleys of Diyarbakir. What happened was not just isolated massacres, but rather the policy of an entire state that viewed the Armenians as an internal threat, deserving of repression and bloodshed. Sultan Abdul Hamid II, later dubbed the Red Sultan, was haunted by the collapse of the Ottoman Empire, especially with the rise of nationalism among its peoples and the emergence of demands for independence, particularly from the Armenians, who were seeking political reform and social justice in light of the discrimination and injustice they had suffered. In 1894, the massacres began in the Sasan region and then spread to Diyarbakir, Urfa, Mush, Zitan, Van, and other Armenian-majority areas. These massacres were later called the Hamidian Massacres, after the Sultan, who ordered, or at least authorized, the Hamidi cavalry, a Kurdish militia loyal to him, to subjugate the Armenians by excessive force. How many victims? Estimates range from 100,000 to 300,000 Armenians between 1894 and 1896. Murder, looting, and rape were used as a means of collective terror. Cities were burned, churches were destroyed, schools were closed, and the names of the dead were written on the walls of those left to remember. In Annie's account, some of the stories were true and she did not change their names. She wrote about the child Herod in Urfa, who was burned in his church after refusing to surrender his small cross, and about Miriam, who was raped by 4 soldiers in front of her father, and about Father Krikor, the blind man, who would say to those hiding with him, "The world has darkened, but I see it with the light of God, so stay with me." In her novel, Ani did not deny that some Armenians took up arms to defend themselves, especially after years of oppression, but they were a minority among a defenseless people. Nevertheless, the Ottomans used this as a pretext to launch mass massacres, exploiting the silence of Europe, which at the time was more concerned about the balance of power than about the blood of the Armenians. In Paris, the novel was initially banned from publication. Publishers told Ani, who would believe a little girl from the East? Politics hates the truth. But newspapers published excerpts from it, activists translated it into English and French, and the world began to listen. Later, her book became one of the first unofficial sources to report on the Hamidian massacres, followed later by the Great Pogrom of 1915 under the Union and Progress government. A French critic wrote of her novel, "Annie wrote in blood, not ink, and made the ink a bleeding light."